Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next panel. It is my pleasure to introduce the moderator, Chuck Feinberg. He is the chairman of the New Jersey Clean Cities Coalition. Mr. Chuck Feinberg has a broad professional, technical, and business background. He is the executive vice president and a partner in the environmental and clean energy sustainability consulting firm, Greener by Design, LLC. He also chairs the board of trustees and is the U.S. Department of Energy's designated coordinator of the nonprofit NJ Clean Cities Coalition, NJ's only statewide entity focused exclusively on the promotion of public-private partnerships to advance alternative fuels and advanced vehicles, fuel blends, fuel economy, plug-in vehicles, and idle reduction initiatives. He has led successful proposal efforts and managed large grant projects and contracts from the US DOE, US EPA, NJDEP, and NYSERDA, dealing with a variety of alternative transportation fuels and related infrastructure, as well as other clean energy and microgrid projects. He also provides a variety of services to other public and private consulting clients. Chuck was recently unanimously elected to the advisory board of Empire Clean Cities. He served as chair appointed by the president of the NJ Board of Public Utilities of an NJ State Energy Master Plan Advisory Work Group on alternative fuels and vehicles, and he chaired the NJ Clean Energy Innovation Council's Committee on Alternative Transportation Fuels. He also served on the board of trustees of the National Nonprofit Transportation Energy Partners, and he co-chaired the Sustainability Jersey Green Fleet Task Force. As a senior environmental and clean energy professional, Chuck has a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from Tufts University, a law degree from New York Law School, and is admitted to the bar in New Jersey and New York. I now welcome Mr. Chuck Feinberg to lead this panel as the moderator. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm afraid that took up half the time of the panel, and it just tells you that I've been around a long time. Can the panel please come up? So this panel is an interesting panel, and something I'm very passionate about is the potential for hydrogen and fuel cells, particularly in the transportation sector, but in all of the sectors, economy-wide. And we heard the last couple speakers alluded to hydrogen a bit and talked about the need for it. We're going to have some experts here really get into it, and I don't want to take a whole lot of time given my impression of it, because I want these experts, and we truly do have an expert panel. We have a lot of panelists, so I'm very excited about it. I think our first speaker is Joanne Milliken, who is joining us virtually, and I'm not sure how that's working, so if somebody could tee her up, that would be great.
Okay, I believe I need to, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Joanne, but before you go, I just want to say I'm going to have each of the speakers introduce themselves very briefly. Trust me, they are all experts, so I don't want to take a whole lot of time with introductions and background. I want everybody to jump into their presentations, just have short presentations, and then what I'd like to do is have discussion and take your questions. So Joanne, go ahead. Thank you.
Did you say you were going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves first?
No, you each will go when it's their turn, so you go ahead.
All right, so thank you. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak at the conference, especially to accommodate my inability to be there in person. I'm very honored to be part of the conference and part of this panel. I'm the director of the New Jersey Fuel Cell Coalition, which is an ad hoc group focused on education and outreach to communicate the benefits and opportunities that hydrogen and fuel cells provide to clean energy goals, and also to bring stakeholders together and enable collaborations. So our coalition has been collaborating with Chuck and the New Jersey Clean Cities Coalition for several years now, and also with the other organizations on the panel, as well as many more. So what I'm going to do is just quickly give a snapshot of the hydrogen and fuel cell space. And as a former DOE program manager, I am going to draw heavily from the public information that DOE makes available. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, hydrogen is of interest as an energy carrier because it offers zero or near zero emissions, carbon emissions, as well as zero or near zero criteria pollutants, especially if it's made from renewable sources. But also, although we do want to get away from the fossil fuel production methods, there are development efforts in carbon capture and sequestration. So, as well as making hydrogen from nuclear energy, another zero emission source. And then, of course, hydrogen can be used in a variety of applications, many applications. Today, it's primarily used in petroleum refining and ammonia production, I think over almost 90% or over 90%. However, there are so many more applications that hydrogen can be used in to decarbonize our emissions. The best use of hydrogen is in fuel cells, of course, and that's because of their high efficiency compared to combustion engines, 2 to 3 times the efficiency of combustion engines. It's important to know fuel cells are a partner to batteries, not a competitor. That's an important point that is often missed. So hydrogen fuel cells offer advantages in some applications where batteries don't perform as well. So for example, refueling, enabling longer range in vehicles, refueling a vehicle in a shorter time frame. And fuel cells also offer like batteries scalability, and so they can be used in just about every transportation application and also in a lot of stationary applications. Now, oftentimes we hear people talk about the well-to-wheels efficiency of hydrogen fuel cell systems. And it is true that the battery system is well-to-wheels is higher efficiency. However, fuel cells offer advantages in many applications, such as utility, productivity. For example, in certain material handling applications where the forklifts operate 24/7, there are productivity gains from using fuel cells rather than batteries because you don't have to change the fuel cell out to recharge it, and other productivity reasons. So there's also the energy resilience that fuel cells bring, particularly in the stationary application. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that, but in terms of utility, productivity, and resilience, fuel cells do offer some advantages that make them a good partner for the batteries that are used in other applications. So the challenge, of course, is building the infrastructure to achieve the economies of scale that enable affordability of hydrogen and fuel cells. And so this is a DOE schematic you've probably seen many times, some of you, that talks about hydrogen in the entire energy ecosystem as an energy storage medium for the grid, in the gas infrastructure. If we're going to be making from fossil fuels or blending hydrogen with fossil fuels with natural gas to reduce the carbon footprint of natural gas use. The approach, of course, is to enable hydrogen at scale, an initiative that DOE has been talking about for many years, and the bipartisan infrastructure law, which you'll hear more about later, has enabled this to happen by contributing significant investment of federal funds and requiring an equal investment from states and industry in this endeavor. And you're going to hear more about the regional hydrogen hubs from other speakers on the panel. So there is precedent. There has been a lot of progress over the past couple of decades in hydrogen and fuel cells. Now in the U.S., it's mostly in California. There's more than 50 retail stations open now. There's 24 more in permitting and 12 more proposed. Over 14,000 fuel cell vehicles have been sold or leased in the U.S., again, mostly in California. They have 66 fuel cell electric buses there in commercial, in retail service. And they've carried over 19 million passengers to date. They have more fuel cell buses in the works. And Ohio recently started a fuel cell bus fleet. And then, of course, fuel cells have been used in forklifts for years in many locations of the country, including in New Jersey. And then there's quite a bit of backup power installed. Over in Japan and Europe, they've also made considerable progress. You can see the numbers there. And Japan is moving into the residential market with fuel cells. So that's going to be interesting to see how that works out for them. We can learn a lot from California in particular about building a hydrogen infrastructure. And their focus has been primarily on light-duty vehicles, whereas now the focus is shifting to heavy vehicles and medium-duty vehicles. So I'm not going to talk about these individually in detail. I just want to point out that, again, fuel cells are being used or demoed in just about every transportation application. UPS and FedEx are testing fuel cells in their delivery vans. The Army is testing fuel cells in an all-terrain vehicle that GM provided the fuel cell for, and maybe even built the vehicle. I think they did actually. Also, that upper, there you go. The tow truck. There's a tow truck fleet that's being tested at a Memphis airport, and then down on the bottom, Nuvera fuel cell and material handling equipment at the Port of LA. There's also the Port of Long Beach, where fuel cells are being used, not just in material handling, but also in stationary applications and other applications like drayage trucks. And then there's a ferry being demoed in San Francisco Bay. And then overseas, fuel cells are being tested in trains in Germany, in planes, also in Germany, and in a fleet of taxis in Paris. So that's a quick snapshot. This last slide just describes the coalition and how we operate, what we do. And that's, I think, all I have to say to
Great, thank you, Joanne.
give you a quick snapshot.
Yeah, so if you could hang with us to stay for the Q&A later, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you for that overview. So, in order for fuel cells and sustainably produced hydrogen to really become widespread, there's still there's several leaps of technology that are going to be necessary, and there's certainly some leaps in government policy and regulation. So our next speaker is from the Board of Public Utilities, Kevin Nesner. Kevin, I never actually knew that your title was Decarbonization Manager at the BPU. I see it on the agenda here. I think the fact that the BPU has a decarbonization manager is a statement in itself. So, Kevin, you can speak from there. You can come up, whatever you prefer.
I see the. I'll come up.
Oh.
Hi, everyone. I know we have a large panel and we're short on time, so I'm going to keep this very short and sweet. So the background on this is back in 2019, Governor Murphy signed into law, the number doesn't matter, but he signed into law that created the New Jersey Fuel Cell Task Force. And if I could sum up what the task force is supposed to do in one sentence, it would be the sentence on the screen, that they're there to develop a plan to increase the use of fuel cells in the state and to provide information, education, and resources for that purpose. So the task force consists of 15 members from across state government. We have 5 agencies represented, several members of academia, and also members from private industry, ranging from fuel cell manufacturers, fuel cell vehicle manufacturers, hydrogen suppliers, all the way down to people with familiarity with retail gas stations and selling fuel. The task force is additionally required to develop an annual task force, which we are actually doing in conjunction with CSAC. The report is not yet released, though, so I can't talk about that, which is part of the reason why I can keep this very short. The Board of Public Utilities was designated in the law to provide staff for the task force, which is actually how I got here. When we were looking at developing the report, which I hope is released soon, it's just about finalized, we broke into 6 working groups to really try to tackle the issue. The first was education safety. Without getting into too much detail, I think a lack of awareness is a lot of the issue. A lot of people are just aren't familiar with what a fuel cell is, what hydrogen is, and the uses for it. There's also concerns with safety. A lot of people who do know what hydrogen is are afraid of the safety, which it's really come a long way. The concerns aren't really there. And also workforce development. And we had an electricity group which looked at fuel cells, not just from putting them in vehicles, but also stationary for generation, for energy storage, energy resilience. Going forward, personally, I think that hydrogen has a very large role to play in energy storage, hydrogen and fuel cells. And there's the transportation side. There are right now existing fuel cell electric vehicles, passenger vehicles, but also fuel cells are very important for hard to decarbonize sectors, such as medium heavy duty trucks. It's a lot easier to get a fuel cell truck than it is to get the load you need to power a battery for a truck. Is quite what's the word? It's immense. And in material handling, there's actually a lot of fuel cell forklifts operating now, even today in New Jersey. That's kind of a real case use for that. But just to keep this moving, there's also a fuel production team looking at how to produce clean hydrogen for use in fuel cells. There's a manufacturing side. There are several fuel cell manufacturers in New Jersey, but obviously we'd like to grow that and develop a robust supply chain in New Jersey and also create jobs. And then lastly, we had a planning group that kind of coordinated with everyone and worked on issues that impacted more than one group. So just one more, finish up on the task force report. The first goal, like I said, is to increase public awareness on what a fuel cell is and what its use is, both in transportation and on the stationary side. And to really make the case for fuel cells and hydrogen as an integral part of New Jersey's decarbonized energy future. We also wanted to show why New Jersey is a good place to do this and why we can be a leader going forward. There's also a federal hydrogen hub opportunity, which I'm sure someone else will talk about, where the feds are giving out $8 billion right now to hydrogen hubs. So we were trying to inform that process and be part of it. And in general, just to make recommendations forthcoming that will increase the fuel cell adoption in New Jersey. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker will be Megan Smith from Montclair State University. Let's hear it from Megan.
Hi everyone, as Chuck said, I am an assistant professor with CSAC. I've been with CSAC for quite a long time. I started as a PhD student and was lucky to be welcomed back as a professor. In addition to that, I was also part of the group that was working with the New Jersey Fuel Cell Task Force in a partnership to develop their report, which, like Kevin mentioned, has not been published yet, but I'd like to talk a little bit today about how we worked with them and what we did to develop the report. So first I wanted to mention a couple of things about the benefits and the importance of partnering with a university. One is university researchers are first and foremost public servants. So by working with a university or with CSAC, you have the benefit of knowing that the information that's getting to you is going to be in the public's best interest. Our full intentions are to generate data-driven results and disseminate them in a way that is digestible to several different audiences, whether it is someone just off the streets or several professionals in a conference like this one. We also offer a diverse body of researchers, which allows new perspectives, not only from our cultural and educational backgrounds, but also from our specializations over the course of our educations. We also have access to and expertise with specialized tools and resources, not just in our own research group, but also by being within a university, we have access to things that other people, for one reason or the other, may not. We also have a great deal of experience of fostering authentic relationships with multiple stakeholders. Because we're coming into the room as a non-biased perspective, we have the ability to talk to different people from different backgrounds with different perspectives and be able to foster these relationships and hopefully build steps towards developing solutions that will benefit multiple people's wants and needs. And lastly, this all works as a feedback loop. So by working with the university, we're allowed to look inwardly and then reevaluate our programs. Our goal as a university is to bring students out of the university and into the workforce and make sure that they're able to provide the skill sets that you're looking for your jobs. So that allows us to look inwardly and create better programs for you. Kevin already gave an introduction about the task force timeline, but just to give a little bit more about our involvement, in January 2022, so about a year ago, the task force and CSAC signed a MOU to begin our partnership. And to skip forward a little bit, in April 2022, the task force shared a preliminary report with the governor's office, which was primarily their recommendations. And finally, we as CSAC sent our final draft report with the task force in September 2022, which is still over the course of review. Here's a very bare bones look at what the report would be. This is just the subject headings. Like Kevin mentioned again, we have an overview of what exactly fuel cells and hydrogen are, how New Jersey stands in this field, safety codes and standards, education and workforce development, and of course the recommendations which were written by the task force members. But what I primarily wanted to talk about today in this little bit of time that I have is Chapter 2, which is how New Jersey is well positioned for fuel cell and hydrogen market development. So here's a map, which you probably can't see too much detail on, unfortunately. But this is a display of the current New Jersey hydrogen and fuel cell supply chain. So those that are directly and somewhat indirectly involved with this subject. New Jersey is an education force. We have the benefit of having 7 research universities, 4 public, Montclair being one of them, and 3 private. And we also have over 65 2-year and 4-year colleges. So if you think about both the population density and the density of industry in this area, the possibilities for building this supply chain is really endless, especially when you're talking about in terms of workforce development and bringing in educated people into the field. We also have over 20 existing hydrogen and fuel cell supply chain companies. Those are companies that are already directly involved. So if you think about the bigger picture, about the possibilities of manufacturing, engineering, all the other things that we already have a lot of in New Jersey, there's a lot of different companies that could be involved to build an even stronger hydrogen economy. Joanne earlier mentioned the many applications of hydrogen and fuel cell technology as well. But just to touch briefly on it, I have 2 maps displayed here. The one on the left is the existing cell towers in New Jersey, and the one on the right is existing hospitals in New Jersey. One key possibility for applying this technology is as either primary or backup emergency emergency electricity generation, which both hospitals and cell towers would of course need in state of irregular accessibility to electricity needs. So by being able to transition to this clean energy technology rather than relying on diesel fuel generators, we really stand to benefit both in terms of decreasing our carbon footprint, decreasing the associated emissions, but also creating a more reliable electricity availability for these areas that need it most. We also have mobile applications, which, if you can imagine, the growth of the battery electric vehicles over the last several years, you can somewhat picture of how that could also be applied to hydrogen fuel cell vehicles as well. While there might be some challenges in terms of getting these vehicles on the roads as personal vehicles, there's a great deal of opportunity in terms of public transit, warehouse logistics, anywhere from manufacturing equipment or forklifts, things like that. And New Jersey, since we have this large coastline, we also have a lot of opportunity in terms of our shipping and port logistics as well. So just some key takeaways. No one's really discussed the barriers to this, and of course, There's a reason why hydrogen and fuel cells are not yet well established in New Jersey. It's because of the several barriers. But the purpose of the report and the purpose of the task force is how do we address these barriers in a way that is feasible and meets the timeline that the New Jersey's Energy Master Plan is hoping to reach. So some of those main barriers include hydrogen production and distribution. A lot of that can hopefully be resolved by the opportunity of the recently announced Northeast Regional Hydrogen Hub. I know many of us on the task force were excited to see the announcement while we were in the process of writing the report and the recommendations that the state is already also a believer in having hydrogen be a part of the pathway towards a clean energy future. Of course, we also have our lack of existing fueling infrastructure, which that's a challenge of its own. But as we've seen with battery electric vehicles, infrastructure can be changed. It just takes a lot of time and change as far as legislative incentives and, of course, putting it into play. We've also talked about grid modernization earlier today, so I won't get into that. But, of course, for a clean energy future, we need our electricity to be generated from clean sources. And also we have challenges that discuss equitable application. So clean energy should be available to everyone. Maybe people who don't have access to it right away may have it in the future, but there's many incentives for clean energy that currently exist that could eventually incorporate hydrogen and fuel cell technology as well. So one other great opportunity against all of this is not only making the change in legislation and government, but the task force itself also has the ability, since they are a group that's collaborating together, is the ability to educate the public and educate industry and other partners as well. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. So our next speaker is Bob Ketting from the DEP, and he's going to talk about some of the environmental and emission benefits and ramifications of moving towards hydrogen. Thanks, Bob.
Hi, everybody. Bob Ketting. I'm Assistant Director for Climate Change, Clean Energy, and Sustainability at DEP. And just want to thank Montclair and CSAC for putting this on together. It's a couple of years in a row I've been here, and this is it's good to have everybody here without masks in a more filled up room. So happy to be here. So I'm going to focus today on hydrogen's role in meeting hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells' role in meeting our greenhouse gas reductions. So just a really quick review. Our greenhouse gas reduction goals, two primary goals in the Global Warming Response Act, get down to 1990 levels by 2020. No problem. We did that largely from the transition away from coal-fired generation. That goal was achievable. Global Warming Response Act requires we get to an 80% reduction from 2006 levels by 2050, and Governor Murphy's executive order that we're going to reach a 50% reduction from 2006 levels economy-wide by 2030. So we talked a little bit today where the really the big drivers are, no pun intended, transportation, but in our greenhouse gas inventory, we look at in the most recent published that we're going to be coming out this year with our mid-cycle update, and we'll have 2020 data. There's always a little bit of a lag because of different updates from different sectors. But transportation, we've talked about that's the biggest, and then really buildings, residential and commercial, and electric generation. So those three big ones right there. It's very important that we look at those and we don't look for solutions to them in a silo. There is an interdependency between those. That's why I think it's this format, and I'm pleased to say that the way we are approaching this, it's not a DEP regulatory thing. It's not a energy regulatory thing. It's not going to be solved by one private sector. It's energy regulators, environmental regulators, industrial partners, our public utilities, electric and gas, certainly academia, and doing this all, coming up with this and approaching this problem from a holistic solution. Because there is a relationship between, we've touched on this, if I electrify everything tomorrow, Can I meet that electric demand from our current grid? Do I have enough renewables? No. So the balance between electrifying, using hydrogen, decarbonizing buildings, we have to look at how they affect the other sectors and how they affect ultimately the cost of to the ratepayer consuming energy. And it's I'm pleased to say that I think that how we're working together. We have regular relationship with BPU, our industrial partners, our utility partners. We work very closely with PJM in developing our station resource regulations, which Sean talked about before. So I feel like we're on the right track in approaching this in New Jersey from a holistic standpoint. This is my my Friends slide. It's a rerun. We see Friends a lot in reruns. I know Abe had this on before. I think the slide has been really heavily used, but it just reinforces the challenge where we have to go to that. Our electricity demand is going to double by 2050 in the EMP least cost scenario. And I put it up on here because I focused that Abe touched on it a little bit, but that little biofuel is also green hydrogen is a component that acknowledges that we're going to need a source of firm, reliable electricity dispatch. That means on demand, not an intermittent source like solar and wind. We're always going to rely on some firm dispatchable source, and hydrogen can play a key part in filling that need. We were looking at the amount of electricity we need. This slide looks at the amount of capacity we need. So electric capacity need almost quadruples by 2050. So why is that? Electricity doubles, but it's almost a 400% increase in the amount of capacity. So that's what we need around just on call to provide the electricity we're going to need. So what happens is as we rely more on non-dispatchable sources like solar and wind, the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow, you're going to need on-demand electricity. So there's no magic bullet in meeting that. We're going to rely on a lot of things. We're going to rely on storage, battery storage, hydrogen storage. We're going to rely on using fuel cells in a dispatchable capacity. We're going to rely on distributed energy resources, DERs, where you generate that electricity locally, and maybe that doesn't require grid supply electricity. Maybe buildings can be decarbonized not just by electricity, but a lower carbon intensive gaseous fuel. Hydrogen can certainly play a role in that. So this slide shows it's a really simplified color version. If you look at the colors of hydrogen now are it's like bigger than the rainbow now. There's all kinds of colors for hydrogen, but what I really want to focus on is that what we really want to achieve is zero carbon hydrogen. That's represented in green here. It's renewable and nuclear power. A lot of times when you see this graphic, they'll categorize hydrogen that comes from electrolyzers that is powered by nuclear power as pink hydrogen. But for practical purposes, let's just focus on the green hydrogen. You can get hydrogen from fossil sources if you were to get to the point of there was truly a mechanism to sequester that carbon and make that green. But a lot of that is in developmental stages, and you have to look at that carefully because we don't want to have creation of hydrogen as just a vehicle for more fossil fuel consumption. The electricity grid, sure, you can power electrolyzers with it, but again, it's a demand issue. You're going to rely on more and more electricity. It's going to be harder and harder to meet that from renewables. So the thing about green hydrogen, it's going to use electricity, it's going to store electricity, it's going to supply electricity, and it's also going to decarbonize combustion. So optimizing the greenhouse gas reduction from that hydrogen is going to require identification of the best production, the best transportation of the hydrogen from point A to point B, and the best end-use opportunities to really achieve the maximum net greenhouse gas reduction that we can from its use. So saying like in the last slide, the potential for hydrogen to play a key part in meeting our greenhouse gas reduction goals is really, really great. But it's going to depend on production, transport, and consumption. So let's just take a look at that. So how much energy goes into the generation of the hydrogen? I'm going to take electricity and I'm going to use an electrolyzer to disassociate hydrogen from water. I'm going to then store it. So I'm taking electricity and I'm really making a stored chemical energy. What we have to ensure is that there's net reductions associated with that. So, okay, I got the hydrogen from green sources, from excess renewable energy. It is the greenest hydrogen I can get, but now I got to get it from point A to point B. So how am I going to transport it? Am I going to send it is it going to go on a diesel-powered truck, compressed from point A to point B? Is it going to be chemically converted into ammonia and shipped in a liquid form in a ship across the ocean? Is that ship powered by diesel fuel? Am I going to use that hydrogen not for a fuel cell, but let's say I'm going to use it to decarbonize home heating? How is that hydrogen going to be conveyed? Not all of our piping infrastructure distribution systems is the same. Cast iron pipes leak natural gas. It's certainly going to leak hydrogen, a lot smaller molecule. Steel leaks. We can leverage the existing infrastructure that we have that is PVC lined, that is not prone to leaking. We have to make these decisions on how to use this hydrogen and transport it in order to achieve those maximum greenhouse gas reductions, because putting the effort, the cost into creating the hydrogen, we as environmental regulators, we want to make sure that the holistic approach to this results in the greatest net reduction. So then we go to the consumption part of it. How are we going to use the hydrogen? So there's lots of uses, right? You read, like you can decarbonize, hard to decarbonize industrial sources. I can use it in fuel cells. Clearly that provides really the maximum efficiency for doing it. But what kind of fuel cells? Do I want to identify the highest emitters? That's a good opportunity. So as much as you're deciding on how you're going to create the hydrogen, it has to be part of it. How am I going to transport it, and how am I going to use it? And you have to know what the opportunity is before you actually go into developing the whole entire system. So I'm going to end this in looking at one of the, I really don't want to be overlooked, is the co-benefits of using hydrogen and the opportunity that it provides to improve localized air quality, especially in decarbonizing diesel engines. Our little graphic here from our 80 by 50 report uses the Ford farmer's tractor as an example, but that could be any diesel engine. And what I'm showing here in this graphic is the PM 2.5 emissions. So the fine particulate stuff that when you inhale, that stuff gets deep down in your lungs. That's the stuff that you really, really want to eliminate. And old diesel engines emit a heck of a lot of PM 2.5. The large plume represents the older diesel engines. EPA has required cleaner and cleaner diesels, referred to as tiers. So the smaller plume is like the cleanest tier. But what you end up with in diesel engines, they have a long life. So most of the emergency generators out there in our existing building infrastructure and our critical needs support tend to be older ones. Off-road equipment tends to be older ones because they last a long time, right? Heavy equipment at ports and at airports lasts a long time. It tends to be older ones. So there's great opportunity to use hydrogen fuel cells in this application and get the greenhouse gas reductions. You're achieving what I was saying and looking at the production, the transport, and the end use. This is a great end use because you're going to get the greenhouse gas reductions. You're going to use a fuel cell. It's going to be an efficient use of hydrogen, but you're going to get an opportunity to really, really offset what is some of the highest emissions and emissions that really impacts local air quality, particularly in communities that live near transportation infrastructure, have a lot of industrial complexes near them, ports, airports, etc. So this is going to be a direct benefit to the overburdened communities in New Jersey. So that's my last one. Thanks for having me here today, and I guess I'm going to give it back to Chuck.
That was great, Bob. Thank you. So our initial speakers spoke about some of the regulatory and policy issues. Our next three speakers are briefly going to talk about some of the actual projects that are either planned or currently being implemented. So our first is my friend from Toyota, Andrea Labawi. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, Chuck. While you guys are all reading this, I'll just summarize it very quickly. I'm a senior engineer at Toyota. In 17 years, I bounced all around the company. I'm an engineer by education. I've done vehicle testing, station testing, codes and standards development, clean air regulations, clean air incentives, advocacy and outreach, and everything in between. So being from one of the world's foremost producers of fuel cell vehicles, and knowing we have a diverse audience here, I'd like to just start with the basics on fuel cell vehicle technology. It's not space age and it's not scary. It's very similar and it's very familiar. Probably if you think about this time 10 years ago, you guys didn't have as much familiarity and comfort with battery EVs as you do now, right? Like now, in just 10 years, suddenly everyone has a neighbor with a Tesla and they feel very comfortable with that. Well, fuel cell technology is just as robust as battery technology, but what we don't have here in the East Coast is familiarity. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. This is what the vehicle looks like from the inside out. The basic thing you have here is the 3 hydrogen tanks that store your fuel. And this is the special difference. They can be refueled very quickly. The hydrogen gets moved to the fuel cell stack, which is where electricity is produced, just like a battery across the membrane. That electricity goes to an electric motor that drives the tires and also regenerates electricity when you're slowing down. So it stores the excess electricity in a hybrid battery for use later. So that sounds pretty familiar, right? This is what your refueling experience is going to look like, and that's even more familiar to you because it's almost exactly like a gasoline experience, except you've got a handy app or a handy map or a handy thing in your car that tells you where the refueling stations are, and they're centrally located just like gasoline stations. They can support a community of hundreds of vehicles. You look up where the station is, you have a payment card. When you get a new vehicle or a certified pre-owned vehicle from Toyota, they'll give you a card with $15,000 loaded on it for use for fueling. And every station can fuel any vehicle. We sorted that out pretty early in SAE. So there's not that, you don't have to run those filters of is there a network that I belong to? Does it have the kind of charger that fits my car? Do I have membership to that kind of network? Any station you can come to and use your card and fill your car, and you get a fueling about 3 to 5 minutes. So it's very, very similar to gasoline. Our light duty offering is the Mirai. We're currently in our 2nd generation. You can see the first generation over here in white and second generation here in blue. You can see it's improved in looks very well. The second generation comes in 2 trim levels, and that goes between 65 and 74 miles per gallon equivalent. So if you put in the same amount of joules of energy, you'll get that much out. So that's how we compare it to gasoline on an equivalency basis. And the higher trim has more bells and whistles like heated seats and some advanced parking, heads-up display, that kind of thing that just adds a little bit more weight and takes a little bit more electricity, so your fuel economy is going to be slightly lower. And you'll get about 375 to 402 miles range on a single fill. And as I said, it takes about 3 to 5 minutes to fuel, and we've sold a little over 10,000 vehicles. And just as Joanne said, about 14,000 total have been sold. So you can get a kind of an idea of our impact on the market here. In California, Joanne may have touched on this a little bit as well. There's currently 56 hydrogen fueling stations with 176 more being funded. And here's a map where you can see kind of where they're distributed across California. And as I mentioned, you can have an app or you can look up on the website where the stations are. And you can also see their real-time status. So for instance, if they're empty and need to be refilled, or if there's some kind of component malfunction that's causing the station to undergo some kind of maintenance, you'll be able to see that in real time. And down below, you can see what a typical station looks like. The vehicle behind it that you see with the 2 boxes on it is actually the hydrogen tanker that's come to refill the fueling station. We also most recently have some heavy-duty offerings. Toyota uses 2 Mirai stacks to produce a heavy-duty powertrain. We're going to begin production on this in 2023 at our Kentucky plant. That currently produces Lexus ES and Camry and Sienna. And this powertrain, if you purchase it, it comes with its own storage system and its own operating system, its own powertrain. If it stores about 60 kilograms hydrogen, it has over 300 miles range. And this one takes about 15 to 20 minutes to refuel. It's currently incorporated into a heavy-duty truck by our partners at Kenworth. We've been doing this since 2017. Not to the order of 10,000 vehicles, of course. We've only started this. So when Kenworth puts this in their chassis, we were able to use this for what we call the Portal Project in the Port of Los Angeles in the Southern California Basin. And it was for about 2 years. It was co-funded by the California Energy Commission to the tune of $41 million. We put in another $41 million for a total of 82. There were 10 trucks, several operators, and 3 high-capacity hydrogen stations. And here's a photograph that you can see. The Kenworth truck with a Toyota powertrain is towing vehicles from the port. There's also other applications. Once you have a heavy-duty powertrain and a light-duty powertrain, there's a lot of things you can put it into. One of the things that's being tested currently is what's called a UTR, that's a utility tractor rig at the Port of Los Angeles. So this moves containers around from site to site. It's also integrated with a hybrid sailboat. You can see, I don't know if you can really tell in this photograph, it's got sails that are currently pulled down on either side. It's a dual mast boat. When the wind isn't blowing, it uses its solar panels to produce hydrogen that it later stores. And then when it needs to, it uses that hydrogen to produce electricity to run the boat. So that's a very exciting kind of test of that technology. We also have produced a 1 megawatt generator that we're testing at NREL right now that uses very similar technology to replace, like we were talking about, diesel generators for on-site power. Oh, that looks like it, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. That's always fascinating stuff. Our next speaker, we're honored to have from GE Power, Terry Small. Terry?
Thank you, Chuck. Essentially, I've been with GE for about 30 years, multiple businesses and roles, started in R&D. Spent most of my time developing new businesses, concept to commercialization. Over the last couple of years, been working in the area of business development, early stage businesses, which of course the energy transition applies to. So what I'd like to do is I'd just like to start off by grounding you with respect to GE. It'll make sense when we go further into the slides on the portfolio and how it aligns with the energy transition and hydrogen. So as everyone knows, GE is in transition. The new business, GE Vernova, which was announced recently, is made up of several businesses, power conversion and grid, which are high electrification companies. And then you also have steam power, nuclear, gas, as well as wind and hydro. And we also have a business called Hybrid that focuses on energy storage. So if you look at this portfolio and we take a look at the business, GE is uniquely positioned through scale, breadth, experience to support the energy transition in many ways. So if you look at the products onshore and offshore, it aligns with many of the things that have been discussed today, all the way from hydro. I was at a energy and mines conference 2 weeks ago. They were discussing small modular reactors as a potential solution in a mining area to support the region that's not capable of supporting some sort of renewable. Very interesting there, as well as gas-fired. We have digital services that look at the whole portfolio and ways to create some insights and direction around all the systems. And then lastly, around electrification. And just some experience at the bottom. As you can see, GE has a lot of experience in multiple areas. So let's talk about the value chain. So if you look in the center, I'll just start off on the left side actually. If you look at all the GE businesses and the value chain on the far left, they really do align with the whole green hydrogen or clean hydrogen value chain. However, in the middle is really the heart, which is the electrolyzer. That's something that GE works with third parties. So there's a lot of companies that are core in that area. What GE does is provide the power and electrification aspects of electrolysis. But as you can see, all the businesses have the capability and experience to be able to look at a customer's application and work your way back with electrolyzer OEM and essentially build the power and electrical infrastructure with partners that would satisfy that particular application need. One of the things that's worth mentioning is all the way from generation to usage. Interestingly enough, we've had some activity around wind with the Port of Rotterdam, where we're running a pilot that's specifically dedicated to offshore wind and generating hydrogen. That was something that was announced a couple of months ago. All the way through the process, and at the end where in other applications, GE Gas Power customers are interested in off-taking hydrogen to perhaps use in a GE gas turbine for peaking or for adding a percentage or beginning that first step of the energy transition. They may not be looking at 100% reduction, but they may be looking at 5-10% where they're able to take those steps. Just as an example, GE has experience all the way back to pre-1990 with hydrogen in the oil and gas industry, and that experience is carried over the last 30 years. If you look at the installed base globally, close to 50% of the hydrogen combustion and gas turbines is with GE. So not only from an R&D and technical aspect, but also in experience in the field. However, some of those systems were designed specifically for hydrogen. If you look at the installed base, there's a lot of customers that are coming to GE and say, can you help us with the next step? What's the next step in trying to integrate hydrogen into my process? How much can my particular gas turbine burn? So they're the questions that are being asked, and there's been several trials in Australia as well as the US where anywhere from 5 to about 40% has been combusted as a pilot to serve as input for those particular customers that are looking at, hey, this is how I take the next step. So if you look at the next step around the value chain, the customer or perhaps a brownfield or greenfield may come back and ask, well, how would we take the next step? We have some curtailed power from a renewable. What we like to do is we would like to use that and create some hydrogen and store that hydrogen and then introduce that at key periods. Perhaps the system is a peaker. Perhaps they just want a blend to begin to start taking those steps as they build out their renewable, whether it be wind or solar or geothermal or even nuclear. So one of the goals is really to work with customers on an application to application perspective, because not all apply. And I'll just stay on this slide because I would like to just briefly talk about some other applications such as mining. You guys did a great job of covering and setting this up, but in the mining industry, they have goals very similar to the rest of the world, 30% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. And there was an executive summit a couple weeks ago where the mining industry was pointing out their challenges, and they're very similar to what was brought up today. For example, transmission lines. If you have the one copper mine, they were transmission line limited. They were also limited with respect to solar because they were in the wrong region. However, they did have access to hydro, and they were able to curtail some of that power to be able to create hydrogen. And they also, as part of the decarbonization, we were talking about diesel, a lot of these companies are starting to move towards electrified vehicles, batteries, trolleys. They're also looking at hybrid. They're looking at fuel cells, along with electric, to be able to manage some of the more challenging applications. And in that situation, and again, every application is starting to look a little bit different, more complex, or perhaps somewhat easier. But in that situation, that particular customer has some challenges, but you have to look at it holistically and look at what's best for their particular challenge. Now, I'll just leave you with another one. On another occasion, met with a group, and there was auto rental companies. And one of the challenges, which I never thought of, they said when we go completely electric, we're going to need 20 to 30 megawatts of rechargeable power at the airport. And that's something I never thought of before when they had to change out that fleet. So now all of a sudden they're asking the questions. They have a 10 to 15 to 20-year plan on how to increase the capacity of some of these locations that are somewhat challenged with regulations. So just to summarize, there's been some great dialogue throughout the day, and one of the things that I see is that it is about collaboration. One of the things that's obvious is that there's this tool belt of solutions that really can be combined based on the application, the geographic location. New Jersey is geographically gifted with a shoreline. However, if you're talking about Alberta, now all of a sudden you're talking about something that is a little bit more challenged with respect to the alternatives. So again, thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate it and appreciate your time.
All right, thank you. Hey, so listen, I know that it's a long day. Everybody's been sitting around for a long time, so everybody take a deep breath, stretch. We have one more speaker on this panel, then we'll be able to take some questions. I think we have time for that. And then I know there's a couple of additional great panels coming up. So one of the things that I find fascinating with the evolution and the energy transition is the fact that the natural gas utilities in the state of New Jersey are looking for ways to decarbonize. And our next speaker is from New Jersey Natural Gas, and they're working on a number of potential projects and some actual projects on the ground for hydrogen. So Larry Barth, come tell us about that.
Thank you. I thought you were going to ask me to lead them in exercises, but jumping jack. All right, so where do I find my, oh, look at that. Let's get over that. Yep. Okay, yeah, so my focus, as Chuck had said, I'm Larry Barth, Director of Corporate Strategy for NJR. We own New Jersey Natural Gas, which is one of the prominent local distribution, gas distribution utilities in the state. And when we're talking about emissions from the building sector, we're talking about the consumer uses for primarily natural gas, but some other fuels to heat their homes and buildings, which is a critical need. And so we've got to be talking about that. So some of my colleagues here on the panel were talking about different applications for hydrogen. I'm going to be centered first and foremost on that heating question and how do we leverage these types of fuels like hydrogen to be able to deliver decarbonized heating solutions to the state. Now, our CEO has already given us the mandate that by 2050, we're going to be delivering a decarbonized fuel to our customers. We have over 500,000 customers that we serve. So we're going down that path, and that's where hydrogen fits in. And why are we doing that? First of all, we see it as an opportunity, right? So we know heating. Everybody here that's from New Jersey knows heating is non-negotiable for us in the winter, right? You gotta have it, okay? And the way that it's a basic necessity. The way we make choices about how we're gonna heat our homes and buildings, it's gotta be affordable, it's gotta be reliable, and the easier that we can make it for customers to transition to low carbon fuels, the better. The other thing, it was mentioned frankly by the Commissioner Moriarty before, which I thought was good, is to say, we have a plan on the books now, but we have to keep all options open. And we feel very strongly that while we haven't mentioned the term heat pumps yet, but I'll mention it now, while there is a lot of focus right now on heat pumps, I think the question, and that is good technology, the question is it scalable to meet the needs of 3 million residential homes, 250,000 commercial buildings? There's a lot of questions and uncertainties on that. So we're going to need all of the above and a lot of different ways to come at this problem to reduce carbon emissions. Now, as a gas utility, we think about this in a holistic way. We think about reducing the amount of gas that's used. That's energy efficiency. We think about new appliances and technologies that are going to be more efficient in how gas is used. So there's right now some very interesting heating technologies on the board that really will improve the efficiency of heating. We think about reducing upstream methane emissions, right? So when we're buying gas, we want to make sure it's sourced from responsible sources where they're minimizing leaks. We also want to make sure in our own system it's very tight and leak-proof so that we're not adding to the emissions problem when methane goes straight up into the atmosphere. Very important. Yes, we think about low-carbon fuels too. We think about renewable natural gas. We think about hydrogen, the subject of this talk here. And we also think about we have to keep our options open for carbon offsets. There's some really interesting technology right now going on where you're pulling carbon out of the air, direct capture, and they're talking about a lot of investment and federal support to get the cost of that down significantly. And so we have to think about that as part of the mix. Now, hydrogen has really catapulted to the front of the pack, I think, in the past year or two in terms of the excitement and the potential. And I can probably use the word buzz as well. There's a lot in the air about hydrogen right now. So what makes it interesting for us as we think about it long term is some of the projections that say it's going to be cheaper to produce green hydrogen, maybe by the mid-2030s, than it is to drill for natural gas. Okay, so that makes it a cheaper commodity, which gets us interested. And it was mentioned earlier about, well, now you need to move it, now you need to transport it. Pretty good evidence, too, that pipelines will be the best way to move hydrogen from point A to point B, particularly over long distances. And that's something that also interests us because if you can produce hydrogen where renewables are the cheapest and then move it to the points where it's going to be consumed, that's exciting to us as well. But we need to figure out, and we have to be open and honest about it, is, replacing natural gas with hydrogen is not trivial in the pipeline system. What's going to be the impact on materials? What's going to be the impact on all the physics and chemistry? A lot of work to be done on that. And then what's going to be the impact on the end-use appliances as well? We can't just change out a heater that uses CH4 methane to something that uses hydrogen. It's got to be adapted. What's really interesting, though, is how policy has really stepped up in the last couple of years. So we now have 26 countries, I may be out of date already, 26 countries with hydrogen policies. They've committed to 70 gigawatts collectively. That's a lot of gigawatts of electrolyzers. We have maybe half a gigawatt installed worldwide right now, so there's a huge increase here. And certainly what the U.S. has done is tremendously impressive, whether it's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, which put over $9.5 billion of federal money into hydrogen projects, the Hydrogen Shot, which is to try to get the cost of hydrogen down to less than $1 a kilogram by 2035. The recent production tax credit of $3 a kilogram. These are major types of initiatives that really give us hope. And it's really stimulated it. It's doing what it's supposed to do. That the interest, the money that's coming in, you now have billions of dollars of projects that have been committed to. Within our gas utility industry, we count over 24 projects where companies are experimenting with how much hydrogen can we really blend into the gas system? Because when you blend hydrogen right into the gas system, you're displacing gas. You're displacing the need for greenhouse gas emissions. And there's a really interesting one we're watching out of the UK right now, where they've run a pilot. A gas utility up there has run a pilot, and they've been able to blend up to 20% hydrogen in their system with no impact on thousands of homes and on the pipeline infrastructure. I'll also mention that we as a gas industry, we're working at NREL right now to better understand what's going on, how much hydrogen can we blend. So this is something that should excite everybody, because you're really getting the juices flowing in terms of getting a whole industry that's been aligned one way to start thinking differently. And that kind of thing is what's going to make this happen, the innovation and the competition. So we've started small. We've put we've built a project, a small project, which actually we've counted. It's the first East Coast hydrogen blending project, where we've taken a 175 kilowatt electrolyzer. We're powering it with renewable energy. Right now, that's from renewable energy we're buying from an off-site resource. We're going to be putting a solar facility on the site and powering the electrolyzer directly with solar. So it is green hydrogen production. It's producing 65 kilograms a day. That probably doesn't mean much to you, but it's enough over the course of a year to heat 40 homes. It's giving us some reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. What's really cool about it is you put water in to a black box, and what comes out is hydrogen, gas, and oxygen. So the water disappears. So your chemistry teachers were right. It all does work. But look, this is an early stage project. We're learning from it. We're studying the impacts. We're looking at some other types of projects that we can be working on. And all of this is going to help us as a company and as a state meet our goals. Thank you.
That's great to hear and very encouraging. So I think with that, we'll open it up for your questions. I think we caught up on some time, so we do have some time for questions and comments and discussions. So if whoever has a mic out there, if you could move over to whoever has a question. Okay, we either did a really great job and nobody has any questions, or we put them all to sleep. I'm not sure. There we go.
Hi, thanks for that great panel. This was very enlightening, I must say. I learned a lot of things that I didn't know. So one of the things that I think you talked about was the different types of vehicles. And I'm interested in knowing, when you talk about these, hydrogen and fuel cell EVs, so to what level are they autonomous? And I mean, autonomous as in fully autonomous, semi-autonomous, or not autonomous. I don't think we have not autonomous at all anymore. But so that's one thing I wanted to know. To what extent does the level of autonomy affect the energy consumption, and how is that related to the hydrogen ones, the ones that we have right now, and the fuel cell ones? So can you shed some light on that?
I can shed a little bit of light on that,
Sure.
Not a whole lot. The newest fuel cell vehicle has something called T-Mate on it. That's something that you can Google. And it does provide a higher level of autonomy than the average Toyota. And it's not necessarily because it's an electric vehicle. I think it's just another example that's good to add to that. And it comes, the basic, which is the automated park, that's when you press the parking button. It gives you an overview of the parking area you're at, and it identifies potential parking spaces, either back in or parallel park. And you can select on the screen which one you want to do. And then after that, you let go of the steering wheel and you let go of the pedals, which the first couple times I did, it was absolutely terrifying, but it actually works quite well. That's what's standard on the Limited. And then there's an optional purchase of the autonomous driving. And I have to admit, I'm a little bit less familiar with that because the vehicle we have in the DC office doesn't have that. But it's not fully autonomous, but it's one of those intermediate levels. I'm not exactly sure what impact it has on the consumption. In general, there's a slightly more energy usage, of course, because of the computers, but it also saves some because drivers in general are not the most efficient way to use the vehicle by our own pedal inputs. So autonomous driving will also gain a little bit of energy as well.
Hello. Yeah, hi. So with EVs, we were focusing more on the residential market, and we were providing grants to the residential daily passenger vehicles. But in case of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, will we be focusing more on the industrial sector and focusing more on the fuel refueling stations, and then focusing like putting more energy in the residential sector, or will that be both in parallel lines?
I guess this question's for me again. Sorry, guys, I'm bogarting all the panel time here. There's benefits, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this a little bit more. There's benefits in all segments of transportation for hydrogen. And I think one thing New Jersey, along with some other governments, are recognizing is that the benefits for heavy-duty trucking are quite stark. So they are putting a high priority on it. And opening it up to public is probably the most challenging because you need the network of fueling stations wherever they may go. You need the network of dealerships wherever they might be serviced. So that's actually kind of the highest level that we would get to. So maybe starting with heavy-duty trucking and fleets would be kind of an easier thing to do at first. But there's some discussion. I think Abe really had a good discussion earlier about how New Jersey's been extremely good at looking at all the various technologies and comparing them and trying to find the best carbon reduction per dollar spent. And I appreciate that, and I respect it, but one thing that's hard to kind of capture in numbers is the practical benefits of having a diversity of technology. I think we were talking about how hydrogen can aid in the electrification of transportation by making electrification easier, right? Because it relieves a little bit of your generation that you need to pull from your investment in renewables. And there's also a different lifestyle, right? Because all electric vehicles are not created equal. There's different things you need to do with it. They take a different amount of charging. Those with their own garages will find that EV charging might be very easy for them, but not everyone has access to their own parking space, and that might be a little bit more challenging for them. So having a diversity of technology, I think, is really valuable in every sector.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it at that. We're getting the hook here. So I want to thank the panel. This was a really cool panel, very interesting, and something that everybody's going to be hearing a lot more about. As one of the panelists said, there's a lot of buzz in the air about hydrogen. No pun intended, I'm sure, but pay attention to it because it's coming, it's real, and it's going to happen. So thank you all.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.